Hi everyone, I'm Nicole, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be entering the cube series once again, where I take a 1-inch tiny wooden cube and I make it into some awesome tiny art, and today it's going to be a cactus. I'm going to be using Cos Clay Extra Firm, but you can use colored clay, whatever clay you want. A lot of people think that Cos Clay is crumbly, but once you condition it, it's lovely. I put this through my pasta machine and I'm using my mat here to make it the same size as my cube, which is 1 inch. Then I'm going to be using some liquid clay adhesive, and this is going to be the glue to hold our clay on. If you don't use this, the clay is going to come apart and not stick to it. Once the excess clay is cut off, I can blend it together using my favorite tool, my fingies. I also blend it into the wooden block just to make sure it's not going to go anywhere. A little bit of tracing paper can help your block from sticking to any surface you're working on. Using my cube as a guide, I went ahead and made my bottom piece, and don't forget to add your drainage hole. Putting on some liquid clay adhesive and then adding your bottom piece, and now we can blend. After everything is nice and blended, I made sure to sharpen up my corners because I want this to be very cube. This lovely strip of clay is going to be the decorative top of our terracotta pot. I'm making sure it's stuck really well to the clay, cutting it to size, and then I can blend it together so it all looks like one piece of pot. One piece of the pot is, you know what I'm trying to say. I want to add a little bit of depth to our pot so we have room for our dirt and cactus later. So I'm going to add some extra clay and blend it into the pot so it looks like one piece. Making this cactus brought up a memory from when my daughter was very young. She's grown now, but she was probably about 6. We were on a walk in Arizona, so many cactuses everywhere. She somehow managed to get a whole piece of cactus stuck to her leg, reached down to grab it, then got prickers in her hand. She's freaking out, I'm freaking out, I have nothing with me, so I had to go full feral mom and rip those stickers out of her fingers and legs using my teeth like tweezers. Fun fact, it works. And now that we've got one nice looking pot, we're gonna break it. Because you know me, I gotta add some worms. And the problem with worms is once you start adding them to your work, it becomes an addiction and you stick them everywhere you can. So I'm going to do some artfully placed cracks and make a little room for our wormy friend that's coming later. After cutting out the clay with an Exacto and adding some cracks, I can now start texturing with the toothbrush of texture, which I love to texture everything. I tried out some different arm styles to find the ones I liked, and I'm going for this snowman type hand vibe. I cut one piece of clay in half so that my arms are the same size and roll them into this cute rounded shape. I add just one thumb using a needle tool and it looks so cute. Then you figure out where you want to place them and stick those bad boys on. I make sure that the arms are blended into the body really well. You want it to look like one piece and not just two things stuck together. It gives it a more professional, complete look. Don't forget to texture it as well. And if you've seen my Rock Boy video, you're not going to be surprised that I give a terracotta pot a little tiny crack booty. Because once again, I cannot help myself. It's a butt crack. You get it? You get it, you get it. Now for the eyes, you can do any shape you want. I'm using a ball stylus here, and I made this super creepy face. And then we're just gonna, we're gonna plaster over that and we're gonna pretend it never happened. Okay, that is much better. Much, much better. I use my Exacto to cut a little crack out of the top, just to give him a little character, a little personality, and then I could go ahead and bake him. Now that he's baked, we can give him a friend so that he's not alone. I did a clay mock-up, and this can really help you visualize and get the right sizes you want. Then I could disassemble it and make it for real. The girl cactus is basically just 3 balls of clay, one bigger than the other 2. I want to give this a little more shape so she's not just like a tube into the ground, which looks weird. You can see she has a little more shape. Then we're going to do her little space buns the same, but make them a little flat on the bottom so we can put them on top. I mark out the middle, and then I mark out where my segments are going to be. I used this when I made the pumpkins in my garden video, and it works out really well so all your segments come out the same size. I use those markings to help guide where my segments are going to be. I do it light at first, then I go in and make it deeper. After I add these, we're getting much more of a cactus look. We need to do some shaping first. each of these segments needs to be kind of rounded out and pointed a little bit, just like a cactus. To get the rough shape, using my fingers in a pinching motion was the easiest way, and you can see it's already a huge improvement. Did this to the rest of the segments, just trying to work out the rough shape first. It's looking, I know, it's not super great. That's when you go in with your tools and you really smooth it, because we like to smooth it around here. If you know, you know. I use the same exact technique on the tiny little pieces of our cactus, which was very hard with my chonky little fingers. Now the fun part is giving this girl some eyes and some personality. And of course, some lovely lashes. After getting her lash extensions put in, we can move on to her mouth. I wanted to give her an open smile just to give her a ton of personality. I use my ball stylus to push out the mouth. If you have any rough edges, go ahead and just smooth them out with your tool. Now the cactus spikes are tedious, but it is so worth it. I'm just pinching out a ton of little circles of clay, trying to get them roughly the same size. We're gonna roll these out, and I use my finger to point each side. That way one ball can make 2 spikes, which makes this go much faster. I give them a last little roll just in case they get messed up while I cut them. Then I can bake them. I'm gonna use micro beads for the small parts because there's no way I'm making teeny tiny spikes like that. I make sure to make an indent for the bead to sit in. If not, they will roll all over. What I didn't include was 50 clips of video of me dropping these beads all over the place. Now we spent a million years making those little tiny space spun cactus, and we're gonna make sure they don't fall off. And I'm gonna be using toothpicks as armature to do that. Add some liquid clay adhesive in those holes, put in the wood and toothpicks, and there we go. She's a little devil now. Now here's where I messed up, no one's surprised. I should have just baked these instead of flash curing them with my heat gun, because when you do that and you don't fully cure them, they become very, very fragile. So do yourself a favor, bake them fully, then do this part, which is making the holes, adding the liquid clay adhesive, and then putting your little spikes inside. Getting yourself some art tweezers, highly recommend. Super great. Unless you didn't bake your spikes all the way, then it's just gonna snap them off because it's the consequences of your own stupid actions. I would like to thank myself for being smart enough to make extra spikes, probably knowing I was gonna break some. I made sure to put some of that liquid clay adhesive in every single hole so that our spikes do not fall out. I filled any cracks with liquid clay adhesive as well, and I'm using it to glue on my little space buns. I made sure to poke a hole before I put them on the wood skewer, that way they slide on really nice and easy. I wanted this cactus to have an adorable little flower poked into a space bun, so I'm just starting off with some round circles of clay and working them into a petal shape that I of course drop all over. I realized I needed to stabilize these petals and added a piece of clay in the middle. I made sure to fit everybody in there. I started blending them all together. I started with a small dotting tool and moved up to a larger one. This gave the petals a little bit of shape. It was a little boring, so I added a little bit of detail in the middle of each petal. And shaped it and got it to fit in between the spikes and the space bun, which was a little tricky, but I made it work. I wanted to make another set of petals. These ones I did rounded. I love ball stylus tools. They are amazing, especially for helping you shape things, like these flowers. After adding it to the first set of petals, it's looking pretty good, but we want to fill in that middle part. It felt like it was still lacking something, so I used some small piece of wires to add some stamens to the inside of the flower. I stuck my whole cactus onto my super poker tool, which you can get at aceofclay.com, and I'm sticking it in an old mold. This was for my fairy snails, which I have a video on. You can go ahead and bake it. But first we need to make some tiny worms, of course, to go in our little pot. And because I'm a total plant nerd, I of course had to make a tiny terracotta saucer to go with our cube. I just traced the bottom of it, and then used some tracing paper to transfer it to my clay. I guessed how thick I needed the edges to be for my saucer, I guessed wrong, so I had to go back and cut more off to get it the size that I wanted. After figuring out my sizes, I could start working the clay and getting it to look like a saucer. I started raising the edges and working on those corners, pinching them a little bit and doing lots of test fitting. The corners were the trickiest part, but once I got that sorted, I can move on to texturing the entire piece front and back. And this really helped. In the end, was just using my blade to help square it all off before baking. And now everything is baked and we can assemble like the Avengers. Now that hole I made inside of my cactus with that super poker when I baked it's gonna come in handy because I'm gonna use a toothpick as an armature. I went ahead and added my clay after putting down some liquid clay adhesive, and then I'm just gonna texture the heck out of it. The soil was giving boring, so I decided to add some little dirt clumps all over the place. And this escalated, because I started out with a few, I added my little worm booty, started texturing, and then I just started adding so much more. Adding this cactus was so amazing, and this is why Cos clay was key, because if I didn't use it, all these spikes would have been broken already. Here's where I just go for it with the dirt clumps. I use this tool to help me push them under some of the spikes, and then I get to texturing, because it's all about texture. And worms, but before that, we gotta make some dirt. So I used some liquid clay adhesive to help me glue on a piece of clay that I could texture and make it look like the dirt was peeking through. Then with a simple hole, we can add our last little friend. And after adding him, he's giving very much third wheel type vibes, like he's eavesdropping on the other two and he is shocked at what he heard. I was so excited to use this technique that I learned from Ace of Clay, where he takes liquid clay adhesive, uses a paintbrush, and just stipples it all over the surface, and it makes the coolest texture. After I used that technique on my cactus, I made sure to add some dirt to our little drainage hole and texture it. Black is going to be our base coat for this piece. I went ahead and covered all of them, then I can start laying down the color, starting off with this lovely green. I'm going to add some brighter green highlights over the top of this. How much Dr. Pepper did I drink? I am shaken. Too many. That's how many. It's just too many. I covered my little cactus girl for safety, then I can move on to the terracotta color. I wanted to add some shading, so after the terracotta color was laid down, I could go in with a color that was a little bit darker and just highlight some details and edges. It's a simple technique, but it looks so good after. I gave them both some cute little rosy cheeks. It came out a little subtle on the terracotta guy, but that's okay. I mixed some teal green to go ahead and highlight all those little segments. Adding all the paint details has to be one of my top favorite things to do as an artist. Everything just comes alive and you can finally see that vision you have in your head. I decided to paint my dirt a nice light tan just to give it a little bit of contrast. Don't forget to do your dirt in your crack and in the drainage hole. That did not sound great. Once you do your crack, you can start working on your details. I started highlighting all the areas I wanted with some darker brown. This is going to make those details pop. We don't want it to look flat, we want it to look three-dimensional. These adorable little worms are getting their first coat of some pink. This is going to give it some nice contrast to the terracotta. I decided to use pink for the flower as well, but this is more of a coral pink. The key here is just doing thin layers and doing many of them. And because I can't help myself when it comes to detail, I decided to add a little bit more detail to the flower. I just used some plain white glue for this, and it worked really nicely. To color in the faces, I took the original terracotta color and the original cactus color and just darkened it. That way it still looked like it blended in with the colors, but was just a little darker to add some contrast, to really make those faces pop. I've noticed that as I've grown as an artist, I figured out what colors work, what colors don't, and how to make sure that everything looks cohesive and nice together as one. One thing I do try to use sparingly in most of my art is using bright white. Sometimes it can become too bright and distracting, So here I'm using an antique white, or vintage white I think it's called, and I'm painting all of my little spikes, my little bumps. Then I made sure to gloss up my worm, and I used a matte varnish for the rest of the piece. Thank you so much for watching this video, I appreciate it so much, and if you don't want to miss out on my future weird content, make sure to subscribe.